Welcome to the Impact on the Ground podcast series. I'm Tiia Sammallahti, CEO of whatimpact.com, a tech for good company with the mission to become the LinkedIn of CSR. In this podcast series, we'll dig deeper into what it takes to make an impactful change in our society. I'll give a voice to charities, social enterprises, companies, grant makers, individuals, and government officials who all have one thing in common. They are keen to make a difference. We dive into practical solutions and observe the dynamics of those who have resources to give and those working with the beneficiaries on the ground. Let's start making an impact together. So today in Impact on the Ground, we have a special guest from the Foundation for Social Improvement. Her name is Janine Edwards, and she's a specialist on social impact, measuring it and reporting it, and knows everything there is to know about charities. Welcome, Janine.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, what an introduction. Really lovely to be here and looking forward to chatting all things impact with you.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about Foundation for Social Improvement. As we know, the organization is usually called the FSI.
Great. So the FSI, we were founded around 12 years ago with the purpose and the remit of supporting small charities. And really, we want to help small charities deliver even more impact. We know that lots of organizations were started, and the reason that small charities exist is to create change and make a difference for the lives of individuals and communities and the planet and for animals, and doing all sorts of amazing things in our world, but they don't always have the tools and the skills to be as effective as they could be. So that's really where we are. We sort of see ourselves as walking side by side with them, helping them navigate all of the things that they need to do, and helping them get on with the business of delivering the impact that they want to create.
So how many members do you have currently?
We've tipped over the 8,000 mark, so I'm not entirely sure. That's 8,000 organisations, and obviously within those organisations we might have some of their staff, their trustees as individual members as well.
Yeah. So what is the definition of a small charity for you?
For us, so small is less than £1 million income, and the term charity is a bit of a misnomer, really, because we include charities, community interest companies, public benefit societies, unconstituted sort of informal groups and grassroots organisations. So we're available to all organisations, and we've actually recently just expanded our free membership to organisations with an income of up to 5 million, because we were hearing that those organisations was also struggling to access the services and support they need. And our core model is that our membership is free to organisations that are eligible, and then that gives you access to a whole host of very heavily subsidised training and support, anywhere from completely free of charge to maybe £5 for a webinar or £20 for a full days of training. So it's very, very accessible.
Yeah, so you're a charity yourself?
Yes, we are. We're a registered charity ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to generate our own income ourselves. We develop amazing partnerships with organisations that share our values, and we deliver consultancy support and fundraising qualifications as well. So we act a bit more like a social enterprise. We self-generate a lot of our own income that we then use to subsidise our services.
Cool. So we are at What Impact. We are matching lots of companies with charities and social enterprises and these entities that you work with, and it's very important for many companies when they are implementing their CSR strategy, taking kind of a local view. They might have a nationwide client base, and so they have to be relevant in different locations. They might be having branches, offices in local areas, or they might be just a local company who want to help specifically, certain organizations and beneficiaries in their area. So what would you say, what is the benefit with working with small organizations rather going for big charities who then have a nationwide approach?
Well, I think there's a lot of benefits to partnering with smaller and maybe local, but smaller charities can also be national or
Yes.
global in their focus as well. But I think, the biggest one has to be being able to see that real direct impact of the difference that your support can make. And we've seen that time and time again, where a business partners with a charity. It might be about raising funds and making donations, but also helping to address some more of the strategic needs of that charity. So whether it's offering maybe some advice and support or some skilled volunteering time around marketing and communications, maybe it's about actually getting involved in the organization through its some of its committees and structures, and just getting a bit more under the hood. I think there's a lot of opportunities in that respect for partnering with small organizations.
Yeah, and I think that approach is good, what you said, that not all small organizations are local at all. There are a lot of niche causes that are actually just like addressed by these small organizations, although even if you have a couple of million turnover, it's not the tiniest. You have quite many employees and you have resources to do stuff. But there might be very interesting causes that the companies wouldn't even heard of before, but then they might find them interesting and supporting their CSR strategy, and also help them to really make a statement with their choices of support. So I think that's a very good aspect, that you might find very interesting causes to support, not just the biggest, most well-known.
Yeah.
But as we've been speaking before and doing a lot of collaboration with FSI, social impact and reporting of it, reporting what has been done with the resources you're given is very important. It's not just that somebody wants to monitor was there a success or not, but it's the reward for whoever has been supporting, and also nowadays for many companies it's a mandatory requirement to report on their social value delivery if they're, let's say, working for government tenders, or they have certain contracts with, even in private sector, that kind of requires them to do also social value work. So let's talk about the kind of impact a little bit. So it's quite a big thing to say that, oh, what was your impact? What did you achieve? Because of course there are a lot of other kind of aspects that might have affected on the impact of a charity. Maybe there was a legislation change or something that actually created more change than the actual work of the charity. How do you see this? Is this so difficult that it seems to be, the concept of impact?
Yeah, the concept of impact, I think it's the thing we certainly hear the most from our members about the aspect of their work that they find the most challenging. And I think what we really advocate when we talk to them is, you know in your gut and in your heart of hearts from the work that you're doing every day that you are making a difference. You're living it and breathing it and seeing it. But it's just about taking it that little step further to really ensure that you're planning, really clearly planning the difference. You've thought through what is the difference that we want to make, almost having your theory of change in place, which is a bit of a jargon term, but really refers to, I sort of think of, well, the clues in the name really, that it's sort of your theory, your explanation of how your work creates change in the world. And if you can work through that thinking process and say, well, these are the changes, in the short term that we want to bring about, that we think will contribute to a long-term bigger change and show us having an impact. And then it's about putting in place some measurement tools that are really proportionate to your organization, its stage of development, the complexity of the work that you're doing, your size. I would expect to see a very different sort of approach to impact measurement and monitoring, evaluation and learning if you were a small charity running a local food bank through your local church, for example, than if you were an organization working long term with people to help them overcome substance abuse or prevent reoffending from leaving prison. So it's really got to be proportionate. But it's just, again, thinking through that, and always at the heart of it thinking, well, what tells us that change is happening? What can we sort of see and observe, and what will we be seeing with people to tell us that is happening? And then it's really about using what you're learning to improve what you're doing, to really understand why what you do works, but to be able to communicate that with others so that people can see the difference that you're making and how working with you can help them to achieve their objectives, whether it's about them showing their social value as a company, whether it's about them demonstrating to their employees that they're a good organization to work for because this is how we add value to the communities that we live and work in. There's a whole host of ways, but it's about sort of using that information really strategically.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes even misconception within whether it's companies or even within charities that you only measure the impact to prove that you achieve something, but it's more, it's been developed more of the development of your work, because so you should know what works and what not, and if something doesn't work that well, or do you get new ideas based on your research, whether it's interviews, surveys, observation, some statistical analysis or something, or benchmarking even, you kind of learn new ways to make a better impact. You should apply that to your job so the beneficiaries would benefit. And then the secondary aspect of this is then reporting back to those who help you, to get the funding or other resources to do the job.
Yeah, exactly.
So I see that a lot in company annual reports, and even bigger companies, that they focus a lot on outputs, what we call in the professional language, which are numerical indicators, kind of part of the impact, but they are saying that this many people reads and 10,000 meals given, 6 million people helped. What do you think about this kind of impact reporting?
I think it has value, but in and of itself, it doesn't tell that sufficient story of change. There was some really interesting research published a few years ago now, might be 5 or 6 years ago, from NPC, that looked at the annual reporting of the sort of 100 largest charities. And yeah, 90% of them great at reporting on outputs, the kind of what they delivered, but less than half were actually talking about the change. I think it was 46% reported on the change, the outcomes that they delivered. And what they noticed as a common weakness was sort of a real lack of a logic for someone who doesn't know the organization, trying to understand, okay, so that clear narrative about here's what we do, here's why we do it, because this is the need that we're addressing, and yes, this is the scale of what we deliver. Yes, we had 500 people walk through our doors every month, or 500 people that accessed our services this year, but what is the really compelling piece, and what corporates and donors and supporters and volunteers all want to know is, yes, but what's the difference that that's making? And that's not always easy to collect, but it's about coming up with some outcomes that you're going to prioritize, whether it's reducing isolation, improving confidence, helping people back into work, but really thinking through what's the change, and then thinking about some proportionate and straightforward measurement tools that can help you demonstrate that change is happening. And that's the bit that really, in our experience, captures hearts and minds and makes organizations want to get involved with charities.
Yeah, definitely. And I share your views that, that it's sometimes you're just saying that all the changes that somebody who was hungry got food, but that's just the first instance. If the person who is suffering from hunger is getting a meal every day, what is the change that it creates the person's life? They might not need to try to find the food or collect something the whole day. They can actually pay attention to do something else productive for themselves, make a living, and so on. So that is then the change. They get access to their own money, and eventually they don't need a free meal anymore. So that's kind of the logical path. This is just one example. So we would call them like outcomes.
Yes, absolutely.
Like these kind of short-term changes that, yes, maybe the free meal helped release some time to actually look for a job, get in the job, and then they could start earning themselves and got out of the ultimate poverty. But then like a longer term impact, what this had on the person might require much more longer like follow-up period.
Yeah.
What would you say about that? What is the difference between the outcome, the short-term change, to comparison the impact?
Yeah, well, that short-term change is often the easier thing to measure, because you're in touch, you're only ever in touch with someone often for as long as they need you. So, for example, I did an evaluation project where we looked at the social return on investment of a prison mentoring project. So, where people leaving prison access mentoring support from volunteers in the community, sort of through the gates. So it started at 3 months before release and it continued for a year after release. And it was very easy to track while they were engaging with it. You can track all of those short-term outcomes, and they used an outcome star model, which sort of identified some of their different life factors, like their family relationships, their work and employment, their kind of life skills, and tracked a number of different things that have been shown to be quite critical in giving someone the tools they need to not reoffend in the future and to help them overcome their barriers. But the challenge becomes, when someone's moved on and they have turned their life around, they don't necessarily want to re-engage with you or reconnect with you, because that can be a reminder of some of their past negative experiences. And I think that's where we have to acknowledge that we can't stay in touch with everybody, and we might only be able to sort of keep that longer term contact with a small sample of the people that we've worked with. But if we can be gathering their stories and really hear those stories of change that have happened, we can start to be able to communicate that longer term impact that we're having.
Yes. And I guess, like you said, that it's hard to monitor also years and years, because some of the kind of impact comes to an effect after so many years, that it's a lengthy time to also follow up. So kind of we've been talking a lot recently in What Impact about proxy-driven, like a social return of investment type of measuring. And even here, when I'm talking with you, I'm kind of inclining into thinking that what we talk about a lot of is this kind of a proper, like a research or monitored outcome-based reporting, which is very, very much qualitative. Of course, there are numbers involved, but, evidence and comments and testimonials and, monitoring to change, that is not really something that you could maybe monitor with proxies, because every organization who delivers the work do it a little bit differently. So it's not that, if there's a homelessness charity, everybody does the same work. They have different methods, they have different service, kind of offering. They have different people working, different kind of facilities and so on. But then when you move into the longer term impact, which is very hard to monitor after several years to get people to answer your questionnaires or even reach them, maybe that could be more than evaluated with help of proxies as well. So if you have any indicator saying that we have now, based on our sample group, like you said, of this impact, let's say 80% of people said that they have actually able to keep the work, like you were saying about the kind of people released from prison going to work, then you could expect that maybe 80% of everybody hosted had been keeping their job. And then there are like average like ratios, how much money the society might be saving, kind of because people actually have a job and that provide themselves, and they can keep their children and kind of live in more of normal life, how much value that delivers to the society. So that's kind of, but I don't know, what do you think about these proxy-driven social return of investment evaluations in general?
Well, I think in order to make a calculation on return on investment and social value, you need to use financial proxies somewhere in the equation.
Yeah.
And certainly in my experience of doing social return driven evaluations, there is an amazing kind of existing bank of proxies and data that you can look at. The Wellbeing Valuation Project, for example, that has shown if we see have been able to attribute a financial value to changes in someone's mental and emotional well-being, which is really, really powerful. And I think that it's that often those softer outcomes that we as small charities are producing. We're improving well-being, we're reducing isolation, we're helping people reconnect with their communities, and therefore having access to proxies that can help you demonstrate the value of what you do is really important. But I think that needs to be tempered with one of the core principles. So we sort of adhere to Social Value UK's principles of social return reporting. And one of those principles is to not overclaim. So it's just really important, that in an effort to demonstrate our value, that we're not sort of pulling on as many of the figures that we can to say, for every pound invested, we deliver £500 in social value, because that's probably not realistic. But for example, for the prison mentoring project, we found that for every pound invested into their service, they delivered at least between £5 and £8 in social value. And it may have been more because we took very deliberately conservative values and also conservative levels of attribution and drop off over time, those outcomes didn't last. We made an assumption that they were sustained for a period beyond the project that we were able to measure, but we didn't claim for anything that we couldn't measure and evidence.
Yeah. And I guess that's the you don't overclaim, but also Social Value UK talks about linking, qualitative, evidence with the numbers. So, kind of how did you monitor your success as a single organization? That did you deliver the work as it was supposed to be delivered? And as we know that if there are, projects, not saying that organizations really, but not intentional, but there are projects who might be delivering zero impact or negative impact. And if we don't have the qualitative or this kind of a up-to-date specific monitoring of that specific charity project or that work, how could you know if you even succeeded in the first place?
Exactly.
So there wouldn't be any social return of investment. It would be actually negative in some cases. And therefore, using only proxies if somebody gives money to someone and saying that, oh, this was the impact we delivered, without any evidence that the activities actually happened and the project was successful. And we believe definitely that that's not the way going forward, because everybody can throw money into very high proxy projects and then claim to make some kind of an impact which might never have happened.
Absolutely.
What do you think about it's still many companies are talking to us, our clients, that we want to work with charities who don't have much admin costs. So what is your comment on this?
Oh, good question. It's a bit of a bugbear of mine. I truly believe that an organization has got to be can't be a over amount of admin costs, but you do need admin costs to run a charity effectively. And it's a bit like the saying, have your cake and eat it. You can't expect organizations to be able to measure and communicate and plan their impact really effectively if you're not prepared to invest in some of those costs of doing that and admin costs. But equally, I understand that admin costs need to be proportional, but thinking about the charities I support, I'm much more interested in supporting an organization that has a clear plan of what it wants to do and why it's doing it and what it wants to achieve, that it's investing that time in monitoring and evaluation, but most importantly, learning and improving so that they can really deliver the best possible impact. And I feel like in that situation, my donation is just going to be amplified. Every pound I give them is going to deliver even more social value. Whereas if I gave it to another organization that isn't investing in any of their admin costs, then I don't know that my money is making the biggest possible difference that it could be.
Yeah. And of course, it applies to any organization, even companies. If your admin is not run properly, it's not a very safe place to customers to buy or investors to invest. So it's kind of natural. But I guess this kind of disbelief kind of comes from some like old cases, or people are being paid tremendous amount of salaries, and then only little portion of the donations is going to charity. But I guess these kind of instances come to light quite quickly now, and all this transparency, what is being required, and opportunity to use open data, improved reporting, and so on. Like even what impact we pull open data to charity profiles and social enterprise profiles, you can easily see what kind of, how their books are kept, what kind of a cost structure they've been having. So you can kind of monitor if it's in healthy level, but then you also learn about the impact, which is actually more important than the admin cost.
Yeah.
Maybe the efficient admin actually made the impact improve.
Bigger, I think so as well. And under admin costs comes a whole host of other things, like having the systems and structures to do things efficiently, which again drives the value that you're creating, through making sure that you're investing in staff training and development, so that they are up to speed with safeguarding and mental health, and offering making sure that they're delivering the highest quality services, which again drives the value. So it's definitely about far more than just look at purely on a cost basis, I think would be a really reductive approach, but a lot of other considerations. And as charities will attest to, and I know sort of our membership goes wider than that to other organizations, but we are, the level of reporting that we do is far greater than what companies are expected to do, for example. So there's a huge level of transparency, and all you need to really do is look at, for example, the information you were saying, Tiia, that what impact pulls through, but also drill down into the accounts and in the figures, and if you need to, ask the challenging questions as part of your due diligence process. Yeah.
And that's what we are now offering. We have a communication channel, we have due diligence forms and stuff inbuilt to the system. So it's easy to do that, first bit of due diligence, or bit of due diligence, because in many cases that's enough. So what would you say about, you mentioned that briefly already, that how you measure and report on impact should be proportionate to the size of the charity, but probably also the donation, what you're receiving. So what would this mean for, let's say, a company, let's say, have skills-based volunteering maybe given, or a small grant or something? What would they or could they expect from a small charity? How do they measure? What type of measurement should they use, and how should they report?
Well, I think it's about putting as little burden on the charity as possible, really. But I think it will be, commensurate to the size of the donation. If you're making a significant donation that was funding the cost of delivering an entire project, you might have different expectations than if you were putting in maybe a handful of staff volunteering days, for example. But again, I think that's just about being clear about what your expectations are, and as a company thinking about, well, what do we want this information for, and how are we going to use it? Is it going to form a really critical part of our social impact reporting to demonstrate our corporate social responsibility? And do we have some standard metrics that we want organizations to sign up for? And if so, then it's really important to be transparent about that through the process, so that charities can then make a decision about whether they're able to provide that information, and whether that is proportional to what they perceive for the value of the support that's offered as well.
Yeah, and I guess we mentioned this earlier, that the basic purpose of measuring is actually improving the service. So you should measure those bits and pieces of work and indicators that are actually improving your work, rather than if somebody wants you to monitor something else, which is kind of outside of your scope. So I guess there has to be alignment in kind of the values and the difference what we are those organizations are trying to make together, somebody as a funder and somebody then the actually beneficiary worker. And that's one aspect where we've been focusing on what impact that our kind of machine learning bit of the work tries to combine and suggest partnerships between organizations with impact goals and shared values, rather than just the cause, highlighting children education, because it necessarily doesn't mean that you're still working towards the same goals.
Same goal. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that idea of the kind of the learning as well, Tiia. It sort of reminded me of we recently had a funder who have funded us previously and came back to us for a reapplication. And one of the questions which I absolutely loved was, what were your top 3 learnings in the first 3 years of this project? And what are you going to do differently if you had continuation funding to take that learning into account? And I think, sometimes those sorts of questions can just be really, really powerful to get us thinking about, well, actually, we have learned a lot, and how do we then take that forward into our future plans and demonstrate that?
Oh, I love that, because again, referring to our social impact reporting tool, we have that learning bit that charities and social enterprises are reporting back to companies what they learned, but also we have included what is the negative outcome, something negative that happened. And we have written their little instructions saying that even if it's negative, it's not necessarily bad. Because if there's nothing negative or you haven't shaken anything. If you're creating a change, you should be also maybe at the same time having some kind of a, not in a bad way, negative reaction, but something has been shaken. And that might create a need for some other program to take place. Or maybe you should consider maybe changing your course a little bit so that wouldn't happen. And it's just like, as an example from my previous life, that even these kind of, this kind of education program for immigrant women who have been in the country for a long time but not learned the language at all. So they've been staying home and being mothers and stuff, but really not integrated in the system at all. And the children were almost like natives, in the new country, but then the ladies couldn't integrate. They were very lonely and, didn't have any kind of power of their life. And then there was the charity organizations who, kind of start teaching them the language, cooking the like local foods, going to the shops, and even, learning about the ingredients, which were different from where these people came from, and all that. So they were really empowered and could really connect with their children, because they started to live the same culture as well, and understanding that what were the biggest celebrations in that country, what the kids were expecting to have like any other family. But it created then as a negative effect dissatisfaction within husbands, because and not because they were sort of, what is happening, they were kind of left out, and suddenly their family dynamics changed.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a negative effect, wasn't it? It created a need to provide support and also some kind of program for men as well. So I think that's the learning then, isn't it? And you can develop your service. And I always remember this example. I was like, cool, I'm just still getting like good, like a positive feels.
That's a really brilliant example. Yeah, I really like that. I think, and that's the thing, isn't it? Change doesn't happen in a vacuum. And so people have other people around them and their family network and their community network, and there is that ripple effect of change, and sometimes it's that ripple that can be a negative experience for someone else. And so if you can identify that, and if in your processes you're thinking through what those might be and getting feedback about that, then you can design and develop and adjust your services to meet that need. I really love, there was a story from someone who I interviewed for a case study for a training program for our international development charity cohort. And he really talked about the need to also not be afraid to delve under the numbers and just to really find out what's happening. So he gave a great example where his small charity was providing recycled projects to sort of rural communities in Ghana so that children could use those bicycles to go to school. And what they were hoping to see was that actually, you know, if we change it from being a 2-hour walk to a shorter cycle ride, more children will engage with education, we'll see their attendance improve, we'll see their attainment improve. And long term, that's going to just really change their life chances, because we know how important education is. What he actually saw was that for the children that got the bikes, their attendance decreased. And your immediate kind of reaction might be, oh, well, the project's not worked. They've just gone off and they're going off on their bikes and doing other things. But actually, they sent their project manager down just to stand outside the school gates and kind of observe what was going on. And what was happening was that these kids were ferrying other children. So they were like having them, you know, they were on the handlebars and they were riding 2 people on the saddle, ferrying to and forth all of these other kids to school. So they were operating, you know, as a free taxi service. But it meant that they were then late because they were going back and forth and back and forth. They were then late and they were not getting called, you know, they were getting treated as absent for the day. So, you know, you have to kind of also just think about trying to understand what's going on behind the numbers and be curious and actually observe things in action, because what they were doing there was that they weren't just helping the kids that got the bikes, but for every one of those, there were at least 3 more that were benefiting from access to education.
Beautiful story. And I guess that might happen a lot in many projects, that, you know, people are very solidary and, you know, they want to help and compassionate others and, you know, as well. So, you know, you might end up, you know, kind of reaching out other people, and then you actually have a concrete evidence that you should maybe support more, or then ask other organizations to join this project, because it is really powerful. It's just the proof of the power of the project. You mentioned that you are a charity as well, and you are, of course, like you said, almost like a social enterprise, selling your services with and gaining income. But what type of companies you are looking to support you or partner with you at this stage?
So there's really 2 types of corporate partners we work with, I suppose. One is those that it's on a very, I would say, quite a transactional level. And I don't mean that that's not valued long-term partnerships, because it absolutely is. Some of our sponsors, well, for example, we've worked with What Impact. We've worked with you over a number of years. We've worked with companies like UK Charity Insurance and Premier Charity Solutions, a whole range of organizations that work with the small charity sector, that for them, that's their key audience in one way or another. And what that tends to be is about sort of sponsoring our events and sharing their knowledge and content through webinars and getting involved that way. So that's sort of one lens of it. And as I say, we've got some amazing valued partners that we've worked with through that, including yourselves. The other way that companies engage with us is where they're looking to work somehow with small charities or improve the way that they work. So for example, for one large UK PLC, I won't name names, but for one company that we worked with, they were really shifting the way that they raised funds and donated to organizations. So they had in the past been very focused on the sort of the public voting element, and you know, there's a competition and you've got a week to get as many votes, and the charity that gets the most votes wins the donation. And they've completely switched that model because they wanted to see as a company that they were creating social impact. So we did some work with them in the beginning where we were just offering advice and perspectives. So after 12 years of working in and around small charities, we know sort of what works for them, what doesn't work for them. But also we can test things with our charities. You know, we can sort of share surveys or organize focus groups and give feedback in that way. And then we worked with them to help shape and design their program. But now we are also, for the last 2 years, we've been delivering learning and webinars and adding to their resource library for those charities that are part of their funder footprint. So I suppose that's sort of the second way, which is supporting companies and funders that want to be more accessible and open to small charities to do that, and then developing the learning and support around that.
Yeah, and it's people have different motives, or companies also like different strategic decisions how they want to support, and we are very much talking about the strategic decision making, not just random ad hoc support and stuff, because it doesn't create any coherent story nor message to anyone. And but in your case, if somebody wants to have almost like a scalable change by supporting you, they can support thousands of organizations.
Absolutely.
In this kind of like a admin and social impact. It might seem boring to someone because you don't have the fluffy animal story or the story of Save Children, but your organization will help those organizations.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, we do. And we hear that, we see that in our feedback. We, at the end of the day, we help organizations to deliver their impact more efficiently, more effectively, and to help even more of the causes and communities that they exist to serve. So it's a real sort of impact amplifier, I suppose I would say.
Yeah. I love that. Impact amplifier. The FSI, impact amplifier. Your new slogan.
New tagline.
Hey, thank you so much, Janine. And
you're very welcome.
I'm sure you can be found on LinkedIn if somebody wants to contact Janine Edwards and the FSI. So thank you so much, and I'll speak to you soon for sure.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Yeah.
So thank you for tuning into What Impact on the Crown podcast. It's been great to have you with us. I'm Tiia Sammallahti, CEO of whatimpact.com, a tech for good company with the mission to become the LinkedIn of CSR. Whether you are a company with resources to give, or a charity or social enterprise looking for resources to make an impact, check out our platform and start your free trial now. Let's make a difference together.